Welcome to episode 103. Don't just be savvy, be world savvy. And hopefully I'll be a little more savvy with my notes the rest of the show. We're coming to you live here from Minneapolis, from Boston, from Oregon, from Arizona State, and from San Diego, where I am for the ERA conference. And we're going to hear about an exciting project that, if you haven't heard about it, it's been going on for 20 years with roots in San Francisco first, now in Minneapolis, where World Savvy's been involved with the training of teachers and students to be involved in global empathy, global competence, collaboration. It's involved 808,000 students to date, 7,000 educators in 45 states and 32 countries. And the mission 5 years from now is so much more. If you think that's impressive, Dana Mortenson will be talking about where they're headed. And each of our guests will be doing so. So Cindy and Anna and KK will be describing some of their initiatives recently, as well as what they plan to do in the near future. I think Dana will jump in first to talk about some of the, to show us a short video in that area. In this increasingly diverse and globally connected world, global education and exchange opportunities are vital, and World Savvy is a nonprofit that works with educators and community leaders for the past 2 decades, creating innovative schools where young people effectively engage in activities with extensive problem-solving, empathy, and higher-order thinking skills. World Savvy supports those students in real-world challenges with communities across the globe, preparing the students for the future, preparing for our future leaders. I think I'll end with that. People can go to the blog post. It's much more extensive. There's many links in that blog post. So Dana, can you take it over here?
I sure can. Thank you so much, Kurt, and everyone. We're all honored to be in conversation with you. My bookshelf is filled with many of your books, and I've seen many of you speak. So thanks so much for having us. We're going to kick off with a short video that just from the student perspective, since that voice is not represented here on the podcast, some of what students have developed and created and thought about through World Savvy's programs in the past. So bear with me one moment.
Our project is about the use of antibiotics and hormones in meat.
We worked on a project called Brain Drain.
It's where the educated people of a certain country leave and travel to a developed country.
The project I'm doing is on women's rights. I wanted to try something new because I felt like since it's about women's rights, I would just want to have my voice being heard.
I decided to write a children's book about bees since the bees are kind of endangered and they're dying very quickly.
I hope that my project will change the way the farmers grow their animals.
Maybe I would make a difference in this world. Put out my experiences, I'll pour my heart out on this piece of paper. The title of my poem, Inyo Emera, Women's Rights. Fighting our rights for equality until we're accepted by society. Let's applaud these women who fought for us.
I hope that my project educates kids that about 90% of our food really depends on the bees. And before the project, I wasn't really super into bees.
I was kind of hesitant because I was like, why are we doing this? It didn't really mean much to me, but now I'm like, oh, this is really important. Everybody needs to do something about this.
One of my favorite moments is during our school-wide showcase where we have all the kids come together and watching the kids look at each other's and go, wow, that's cool. And I wish I had done it that way, and talk to each other about how great the other projects were. It fills my heart with such pride to know that they support and really care about each other and the work that they do.
School, it's a lot more interesting now. I found out that if you actually pay attention and investigate more, you can actually learn some very interesting things.
Instead of just saying, oh, it's not my problem, this project made me want to help more people out and focus on real issues.
When you think of World Savvy, you think of the issues that are affected around this world.
It kind of got me out of my closed mindset, and it made me think about the world as kind of more connected.
Global issues seem so far away, but really they're closer to us than we think.
After the project, I just feel like I can do more. I saw how I can really help in global problems and how I can educate people about them and how they can help too.
Empower young women in schools, organizations, our tools. Let rights be legal, we are equal. And gender gap, this is a wrap.
I'll just stop sharing this. Great. So that, just for some context, that was a year that about 5,000 students were working on what we call our knowledge to action cycle. It's a project-based learning model that helps them take global issues, look at it through the personal and local context, and then work over the course of a year in teams to develop solutions.
Do you want to show the homepage of the World Savvy organization?
Sure do. Yeah, sure do. So this is, bear with me one moment. So World Savvy's homepage, where you will find all kinds of resources if you're an educator, and a lot more specific descriptions just about different pathways for whole school partnerships, which is really the core of what we've been doing now is here. And you can see across the top, our educational approach is laid out here, and we use principle-based evaluation. And so some of the core ways that we do that are really 4 pillars: through cultivating connections, promoting active and interdisciplinary learning, fostering knowledge to action, and reflecting and adapting. Pretty much Cindy and Anna and KK can talk a little bit about the pathways here for school partnerships. But we have sort of the way that World Savvy works is really to help at all levels, student, educator, and school leader, to help really think about transforming a school so that global competence is centered in teaching, learning, and culture. So they're wraparound, holistic ways of supporting. And all 3 of the guests here are much closer to what these look like and what the impact is in a school. Cindy has been working with us for a few years in Norwood, and it's grown there across the district. The other things I can share, and we can come back to this as a point of reference. This is free on our website, but the core of the way World Savvy thinks about the development of all of our programs and the way we evaluate engagement and learning comes from our World Savvy Global Competence Matrix. Without spending too much time diving into it, this is online and free and can be referenced by anyone. This goes through behaviors, values, attitudes, and skills that are, sort of represent what we're trying to help young people develop so they're ready for a complex, diverse, and interconnected world. And some of the choices we made that would be interesting to talk about is why to include core concepts. We really spent a lot of time thinking about this as assumptions about the world that we have rather than knowledge, since that can be what knowledge is important can be subjective and contextual depending on where you are in the world and what your perspective is. So this is also online and available to access. But our website also has, I'll show this before moving on, lots of free resources for educators. So to the degree you're not in a World Savvy whole school partnership right now, there are still ways to access lots of learning tools on our site. One of them, and Anna has used many of these, and so she could talk about this, we have a library of case studies that are developed by KK and her team that walk through all kinds of issues that, again, try and make local and global connections. And these are to support educators to bring relevant real-world issues into the classroom and allow students to grapple with them. I'll stop there and certainly can pull other things up as needed if we need to reference them.
Sounds good. Does Cindy or Anna or KK want to jump in and talk about what you're up to?
Sure. I can start. I'm KK Neimann. I'm the Director of Professional Learning at World Savvy, and I've also been a longtime World Savvy educator. So it has been really fun to get to come back here and be part of transforming classrooms in the way that I transformed my personal classroom while I was teaching middle school social studies and English. And one of the things, as we think about those pathways that I've been working on most, is trying to map out what this work looks like with each school that we're meeting with, because every school is different. Every school starts at a different place, but everyone is recognizing now, I think, with a much greater sense of urgency, the importance of centering these skills and dispositions. And as we come out of the pandemic, as I don't need to tell anyone on this call that only highlighted the inequities and challenges that we've been seeing in education for many years. And now we're feeling a renewed sense of urgency to address them. And so in our conversations, we care about empathy, we care about critical thinking, we care about centering student voice and leveraging the amazing experiences and identities of the kids in our classroom. So how do we do that? When we say we care about it, what does it look like in practice, not just as a profile of a graduate, not just on our website saying this is our mission? And so that's the work that I get to do, which is help them make those missions, those profiles of a graduate, help them make them real for students and families and teachers. So I feel very lucky to get to do this work every day and to work with educators like Cindy and Anna and to get to partner with these schools. And it's really just trying to help schools see this path to find where they are on this journey, and then also help them lean into the fact that there is no end zone here. We don't spike the football and call it a day. You really have to lean into this being the never-ending work of education. It is, as Dana mentioned, one of our core principles is reflect and adapt. And so everybody from teachers to families to school administrators are going to have to say, we're trying this thing and we're going to see how it works. And then we're going to try it again. And we're going to keep going in this vein, because that's the only way that we get better. And it really is the never ending work, but it's also the best part of the work. As I always used to tell my students, all the beauty is in the mess. So you really have to embrace that. So that's really been the core of what I've been working on and helping to design programs and workshops that help everybody in school communities lean into this mess and really embrace it and internalize it as something that's important to them and to everybody.
You want to jump
So this is great. I remember writing and getting engaged about global education about 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so my question to you actually is come from Ron Desantis from Florida. So this is challenging. The reason I say that is because right now you look at the United States and also the rise of right kind of way of thinking. In the US, definitely we're examining critical race theory. We're examining, social emotional learning. And you saw the rejection of textbooks from Florida, right? I mean, that's just one example. And also this is the time of closure, not expansion, because of geopolitics, the Ukraine conflicts, and we're trying to pretend we have nothing to do with others. So for all of you, feel free to discuss this issue about how are schools reacting to word savvy now, let's say compared to pre-Trump time or during Trump. Just think about the changes, the views, because I am very concerned that our schools will lose what was just picking up, so this is something I really would like to hear from you guys from the schools. What are people thinking and how they are reacting? So I guess you know what I'm talking about, so it's a Ron DeSantis question.
Yeah. Anna and Cindy, I'll let you go first, just from the perspective of being in school buildings. And Cindy, you've been on a global ed journey for quite some time, trying to lead that at a school. And then Young, I'd love to chime in on the long view, right, of the 20 years and the ebb and flow, because it's a great question. And though I share your concerns, I'm also pretty optimistic. But I'll kick it to Cindy and Anna first.
I think that for us, we have not seen a decrease in kids being willing to grapple with issues, right? I think one of our biggest reasons for embracing this journey in the first place was to really give students a voice. And you heard that in the student video. That is 100% accurate and true, and a reason why we do this and continue to do this. so many times kids feel stifled in a classroom. It's teacher driven, and the work that we're doing is letting students find their voice and letting students find their passion around global issues. So really in our classrooms, what we're seeing is teachers are taking opportunities to have difficult conversations with students, but also letting students do their own investigations and really be the teachers in those moments, right? And sharing what they have investigated. So it isn't top down, it's student driven. And I think that is the key to keeping this journey going and keeping it alive in schools.
And by the way, Cindy is a teacher in Norwood High School in Dedham in Massachusetts, and it's not in Florida yet. Okay, so so just to make sure, when you guys talk, you want to introduce yourself if you haven't, so people know who you are. Okay, thanks, Cindy.
Hi, I'm Anna Lehn. I am an 8th grade English language arts teacher at Ella Baker, and we are a global studies and humanities magnet school. We just took on that new magnet status this year, so it is a becoming process within the Minneapolis public schools. And to that question, my first reaction was it feels like we have a lot more immediate pressing problems that are happening around us. And I wonder I think students are facing a lot of generalized anxiety, whether it comes from these larger sort of national tensions around who gets to belong in America and what kind of thinking we get to do. And the reality is just that the pandemic is still affecting them. I feel this is me speaking for students, which is unfair. So me theorizing that the pandemic is just right now still, and it feels really close. We also in Minneapolis public schools just redistricted, and that was incredibly tumultuous. My middle school is effectively a new middle school. We tripled students from all across the district, and so students were torn out of their home schools, their friend groups. And so we're still rebuilding from that. We're rebuilding from a year and a half of online schooling with more interruptions in January from Omicron. We had to go back online. We had a teacher strike in Minneapolis for several weeks this year as we strove to create safe and stable schools. So between all of those, like the spectrum of things that students are facing, I think there's a huge amount of anxiety that they are feeling. And so what I've seen is World Savvy's focus on creating collaborative classrooms and really centering that as part of the learning and instructional process from the beginning, on student voice, leveraging student voice further and towards action feels powerful because, I think it is permeating down on a lot of levels to create a really anxious experience for students.
And Young, I'll go to the heat a little bit on this question, if that's okay too. So I co-founded the organization with Madiha Murshid, who's Bangladeshi. She's back in Dhaka. She runs a network of schools there, among other things. Immediately post 9/11, with a Muslim woman in dramatic xenophobic backlash, and also during the height of No Child Left Behind, when this kind of thinking and work was sort of the side dish at best, if not, it's certainly not the main dish. So from that time, what I've seen is, and many of the hosts of this podcast are part of influencing that, a move away from that the industrial model of education, the standardization, the rote memorization, that more of this sort of whole child those words weren't even in the vernacular in the mainstream when we started. And so that's been coming for some time. I do think Trump's presidency pushed to the forefront what many, many people didn't think was as pronounced as it actually was. And so we saw a lot of schools coming to us from a lot of places, suburban, rural, urban, that before were somehow able to pretend that wasn't the main issue. And so if anything, it unearthed and made unavoidable uncomfortable conversations about things that that had always been there. And again, many of us are in Minneapolis, which was also the heart of a tragic founding moment after George Floyd's murder for a international reckoning with racial injustice. So similarly, in that way, I think that changed quite a bit. Around the same time, to speak to the DeSantis crowd, we got a grant to start co-creating this model in rural communities. And we started in Tennessee. And we were working in places where politically, we're talking about deep red states, deep red areas, counties that we were working in, the 33 counties east of Knoxville. And when we first got down there and I was talking to the head of the community foundation, this has kind of become folklore and world savvy. I was talking about global competence and, he shut the door and he said, down here, this isn't global competence. This right here is relevant learning and workforce readiness. And we sort of said, we're not going to be precious about this framing, because at the end of the day, if you look at the Future of Jobs report, if you look at literally the skills people need to navigate democracy on a basic level, you can frame it how you like, and workforce development is one critical way. And so we leaned into it. And listen, if you can go to a rural superintendent and say, not only are we going to give your kids opportunities to build problem-solving skills that are going to help the community, we're going to bring them on a college campus so they can meet other people to do it. We're going to let them interact with adults who want to hear their ideas to improve the community. We're going to do a design challenge in the school where they're going to tackle some of the problems you have around transportation or whatever else it is. And so there were other ways to appeal that were less sort of jamming. We weren't going in to say, we're teaching a unit on immigration, right? Interestingly, the kids brought it there in those communities because the kids led. So we said, what's on your mind? What do you care about? And they said, well, the Tennessee River is one of the most polluted bodies of water. It's flooding so bad here because of climate change. I had to take literally a canoe to school. So let's tackle that question. So that was our design question. So we let students lead. And it's not to say that, we're out of the political fray in that way. I mean, there was one heated conversation around government assistance and, those kinds of things that came up in one of our workshops. It's there. But overall, a lot of educators who are in the classroom came there to sort of bring relevant and joyful learning that helps kids thrive to life. I mean, nobody raises their hand and says, I really hope I can monitor tests. I'm excited about, test preparation. It's what gets my heart beating. I went to school for it. And so we tap into that. And I think, a lot of what we're hearing come out in this rhetoric is so loud on the news, but I almost feel like it might be a death rattle. That's the optimistic part of me, that it's a death rattle.
And then Cindy, thank you guys. I just want to add something to this idea, because right now, technically, if you look at it, economic globalization is coming to an end. I mean, and political globalization is coming to an end. But what I see, I would really like world savvy to have a philosophical direction, that our students develop an ideology or ideal to say, we will transform human society into a better one. Because right now, a lot of us are making a financial economic argument. If you know global competence, if you have global competence, you'll get better employed, better paid. It's beyond that. I somehow feel like education has lost a sense of enthusiasm for something that's superhuman. That's to say, let's just move beyond just what we want. I think it might be. I know it's hard. I'm an idealist. So don't believe whatever I say. But I think there is value for human beings to believe in something that's bigger than us. And at this time in the world, we know there are countries, students are brainwashed, youth are being constrained, and they are not doing what they could do. They are not learning what they could learn. I think that's something we might want to shift. Anyway, I just want to make that spiel, So thank you guys.
And if I could just jump in there and to just add one comment, because we couldn't agree more. And one of the reasons why we do the work the way that we do it is so that students feel a sense of responsibility to something bigger, where they start to see themselves as it's not just about me here. It's about a lot, it's so much bigger than that. And I think that there is a parent community who feels a lot of fear around some of these conversations. And the irony of banning textbooks and you can't say this and you can't talk about this is, they say, oh, this is so teachers don't tell children what to think. But in reality, they don't want kids to think at all. And what I am always hopeful of is that when people really understand our model and the role that inquiry plays, it's not my job or anyone's job as an educator to tell someone what to think. It's students get to decide for themselves. And when we can stop being afraid of what kids are thinking, I think that we really open ourselves up to the real possibilities of education. And, as Dana was saying, like, I don't think any of the adults in the Tennessee area knew what was going to come out of that, because people had spent little time asking kids what they cared about. But when you do ask, and when you really center their voices, I think that's where, so much possibility lays in that.
Thanks. And also Anna's conversation right about the Minneapolis public schools. Look at the challenges we have, the pandemic, which is a beautiful, really beautiful, sad tragedy for humanity. But at the same time, it gets us to rethink a lot about the globalness of the disease, the globalness of the politics. It's quite interesting. So thank you. I will stop now. So, other people have questions.
So I'm thinking about when I was in high school and early college. It was the end of the 60s, start of the 70s. And I remember being quite annoyed with my parents and their generation because I felt that I'd been handed a world that was a crock. So the Cold War, the Vietnam War, Richard Nixon as president, race riots. I really felt that my parents had blown it. Well, here I am, talking to my children, failure of all of the UN sustainability goals, climate change, the rise of authoritarianism globally, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Race problems, issues with gender. And wow, I'm embarrassed. So I do think that this generation, every generation faces problems, but I think that this generation may be comparable to what people call the greatest generation, the sort of 1910 to 1960 period, because the half century that we're looking at in the future, we're going to need every ounce of human will and brain power among all the billions of people to come through this. But I want to talk about the emotional and motivational dimension. The intellectual dimension is obviously very important, and there you list the skills that are crucial. But young people have to feel a sense of agency, and they have to feel a sense of motivation in order to really do anything with those skills. In a sense, the dispositions that they come out with may be more important than the specific skills and even the specific motivations. And when I was growing up, basically the message to kids then as now was shut up and, score well on the tests and follow the ladder, follow the rules. Now, I didn't buy into it, but it was called the counterculture for a reason, because it was very much counter to the culture. And I think today is very similar. Greta Thunberg is told, why don't you go do your homework? When in fact, she knew much more about climate than the Trump appointee that was criticizing her, and so on. And I think that kids do get a lot of messages, even from people who may say, well, yes, kids have agency, but first they need to get into the right college, and then they need to get really high grades in college, and then they need to get into the right graduate school, and then, they need to sort of work their way up. And when you're finally a partner in McKinsey, then you can start to really try to do something. And of course, that's not right. So I'm wondering, do you have an approach to try to deal with swimming against the tide of the messages from the larger culture that A, this isn't what kids should be worrying about, and B, it's a pretty hopeless situation, and so can't you just say, well, what can one kid do?
Cindy, it looks like you're going to jump in.
I can try. I think for us, and it's been, as Dana said, a very long journey. We started out with just trying to honor the work of some students who were seeking out opportunities to make changes by, participating in Habitat for Humanity or traveling to Honduras to build water filtration systems with their church, things like that. So we started to investigate, how can we offer kids credit at school for those, for the really important life-changing work that they're doing, and how can we use those kids to inspire others. And we started out as an extracurricular activity where we were offering kids a global competency certificate upon graduation if they were able to demonstrate certain skills and dispositions. And one of the things that we started out requiring was a travel component, right? You have to be interconnected, you have to have experienced some sort of international flair. And we quickly realized that for our population of students, we needed alternatives to travel, because to offer this across the board and have it be equitable to all students, not all of our kids could afford to travel. So we started to look at webinars and global nomads and World Savvies, all of the resources that they had available on their website. And we were able to really open up our program, and it grew to about 75 students. Every single one of them to graduate with the certificate has to do what we call a global exploration project. And most of the kids were motivated by things that we did as part of the club, a global nomad podcast, or on ocean conservation, or and there was another one where we partnered with a school from Jordan, and the kids themselves started talking about racism and discrimination, and it kind of just all took on a life of its own. So I think for us, when we built our portrait of the graduate, it became, and we saw the skills that we were looking: collaboration, critical thinking, creativity, citizenship, all of those skills were what we were doing in this extracurricular program. So in Panama, through a partnership with EF, Dana and I were there to work with other schools in Massachusetts to start this global citizenship program in their schools. And just through a lot of conversations, I was like, you know what, the rubber really needs to hit the road here in Norwood. We can't just be an extracurricular club. We really need this to be embedded throughout classrooms, no matter the discipline, and really no matter the grade level. So our assistant superintendent, when we asked teachers to try to buy in and be like a introductory cohort of teachers to lead this work, the assistant superintendent literally said to them, I don't care about your MCAS scores. I don't care. And that for teachers was like the best thing ever. And it was a very pivotal moment, I think, for us to realize that we had an opportunity here to really think outside the box and try new things with our students. And our students have thrived. We usually do we haven't the last couple of years because of COVID, but we have a global symposium where our students present their exploration projects, and it's limited, to the kids in the Global Citizenship Program. This year, there's kids throughout the building that are part of it. And, all of those students will have the opportunity now to graduate with that diploma, because the club isn't just a club anymore. It is our school. So that has been, that simple message from a district leader was what people needed.
I think Punya's going to jump in with the question. If anyone has a final comment on that one.
I was just going to say, Chris, I was in middle school and high school in the Cold War. I'm a child of the 80s and 90s. And I think the difference is so many of the thousands of students that have gone through these programs is like a very simple shift around like asking them. Like, I don't remember being in K-12 and having people asking me what I wanted to learn or what I cared about. And since we're content agnostic, we're working on those dispositions, we're working on the skill development, we're working on, reflection on the meaning of our lives in the context of something bigger. When you're inviting students to do that, that to me is what relevance looks like, not deciding for them, what's relevant. And so that's where the agency comes in. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I'll just quickly add that I keep reminding my students who are at Harvard, and many don't come from privileged backgrounds, but certainly they found a way to get to Harvard, that you don't have to go to a global South country to see global South conditions. There's plenty of global South counties and global South neighborhoods right within striking distance, and so that helps.
So true.
Punya, you want to? Then I'll go.
Sure, thank you. I had a question, and there's also a question from one of our regular listeners, but let me jump into my question. So Cindy, just hearing you speak about how your model evolved, and Anna about what you're doing, I'm wondering, and again, I think Dana, what you said about Tennessee, that you had to sort of reframe the broad thing. I'm wondering if you can speak to, I'm sure there are many different models and partnerships that have evolved with schools and communities over time. Could you give us a sense of sort of the variety of that? Because I think very often when one thinks of projects like this, you think like you have one idea and you can just implement it, but really it is very deeply contextual and local, even though you hold on to certain core values and vision that you want to get to. So anybody who wants to jump in and give us a sense of a flavor of that. And then I think I will follow up with Dante's question as well, because she is a very regular listener. I would hate to miss her question.
Yeah, thanks, Punya. I'll just set some context, and then I just want to pass the baton. I can't stress enough that this isn't cookie cutter. It's because it would be ridiculous. The differences among, there are through lines for what schools are struggling with and what tends to be the environments for teaching and learning. Some were mentioned earlier, but each group of students, each community, all of that is different, and the folks in schools know best. So like I would say about 60% of what we do is a model and frameworks that are sort of fully baked, and the rest is essentially supporting school leaders and educators there to understand how that gets implemented. So in some places, like we work with a school in New York, KK is doing this work, where they already had a global scholars program that about a third of the students were in. And our job was to come in, help them strengthen that, but then move it out from that sort of isolated piece of the school community out into the rest, so that this is access for all. Cindy described her journey at Minneapolis public schools, where Anna is. There's a few whole school partnerships that are just deep, sort of K-8 schools where we're helping them build everything from curriculum to there's instructional coaching, there's observations. Anna can describe what that partnership feels like. And then also supporting the district in a broader sense, working across middle schools and IB schools that are in the district to do professional development and learning and provide knowledge to action, project-based opportunities for students to engage. So it depends on a lot. And that's why, the partnerships we have are generally 3 to 5 years and built for capacity building. That's the idea. But the idea is this isn't linear always, right? Lots happens in a school community. Our superintendent just resigned, right? We'll have a change in staff. The average tenure of an urban superintendent is 2.9 years or something, right? So while we can't insulate from all of those changes, where our core competency is to say, how do we meet that school and district where they are on this journey and help continue to give them the tools so that they can build capacity, so we are not a crutch in the long run, right? They know how to set up teaching and learning and school culture so that it reflects a lot of these competencies. I'll back off and let KK or Anna or Cindy talk to that too.
Yeah, I can jump in. I've actually worked with World Savvy over 4 years, I would say, in different capacities. I was at a charter school and partnered on a classroom level. And then for a year, I wasn't formally with World Savvy, but I was still using their materials. So what Dana said about being able to get these materials on their website and use them is real. You can do it. You should. And now I'm in this school where we have a school-wide partnership, which is the reason I came to this school. I saw World Savvy was there and I said, that's great. I want that. So my experiences have ranged from really working with this knowledge to action process, which is based on the Stanford design process. I came to it from a service learning training I did, where someone told me, oh, if you really want to do service learning that is not white savior-ish, for one, that is actually serious about centering student voice and making change and like taking students through like designing solutions. It sounds great, and as teachers, we want to do it, but it's so hard. And someone told me, you really, if you can work with World Savvy, they're going to help you. And that is what I've seen like through and through. So from these first years, really on a classroom kind of as an island, which isn't a model they do as much before, but it got me started. And now I'm in this school, we're trying to top down seep in World Savvy. They just have phenomenal ways of supporting teachers. And so I can speak now as a person in a school partnership, which has been curious for me because it's totally different. I have received professional development to start around developing a definition of global competence, because that is such a broad term. What does it really mean? What does it mean to a teacher? What does it mean to a family? And then from there, as an 8th grade team, we've been getting coaching from a wonderful facilitator, really breaking down. So there's this matrix with all these different elements of skills and behaviors and core concepts within global competence, having us reflect on what our strengths are, where we want to grow, what will meet our students' needs, which really has been critical this year, because student needs we didn't know our students before this year. Like I said, we're basically a new middle school. Students are dealing with all the effects of police brutality in our communities. They're dealing with being uprooted from their home communities. They're dealing with the pandemic. They're dealing with the strike this year. And we've been able to work with our facilitator to say, you know what, I was like, I have great curricula I planned, but my students do not feel a sense of belonging and community and trust enough right now yet for them to feel safe to buy in and listen to each other and take those academic risks that we know are what allow them to do the hard work. And our facilitator was like, great, that's where we'll focus, and created these really cool community building activities that we were also, again, classic World Savvy. It was like, first ask the students what they're noticing, show them their own data, have this experience that the students are, reflecting as they go. And then you could end up with a student developed anchor chart of things that they asked for and noticed and questions they have that you can then refer to on the wall. So I'm really learning about how I can infuse my whole student experience with these different aspects of the competency. And like in year 4, I'm saying truly, I'm still really growing with this. But there's so much you can do.
Punya, do you want to ask Dante's question? I'm sure that KK has another response to that question, but I think if you ask Dante, she'll incorporate that in.
Yeah, I can. And so, like I said, this is one of our regular listeners, and I think it's a maybe it should have been the first question we asked to set the context, but hey, better late than never. And she was wondering if you can share some more examples and definitions to help her learn more about the idea of what you mean by global citizen, global citizenship, and global competence, because those can be big generalized words and everybody can have a different understanding of them. So just given the time that we just have, I think, 15 minutes to go, maybe somebody one of Dana or KK, you can speak to the bigger one, and then one of you, Anna or Cindy, can speak to how it contextualizes in your specific space, right? So please.
Yeah, I can jump into this one. So when we talk about global competence, we're speaking very specifically to skills, values, and attitudes and behaviors that we have identified and that the global community has identified. That, you know, we're not the only ones in this space, but trying to identify these things that kids need to be able to go out in the world and do that are really separate from knowledge, which is ever changing. So rather than the technical knowledge that a child might need to do a particular thing, this is saying, what are the skills and dispositions they need to develop to do any of the things that come their way? Because the truth is we have no idea what jobs are going to be available when these kids are graduating. And a lot of studies will show that our current middle schoolers, many will have jobs that don't even exist yet. And when we don't know what's coming, how do you prepare students for that? And one of the ways is by centering the development of these skills that are going to be useful regardless of what is out there. And in a classroom too, I think sometimes there's a misconception that sometimes families or, you know, I'll come across adults that'll say, yeah, but that happens at my school. And what I would say is, sometimes these things are happy accidents that you have, you know, just in the arc of a lesson, a kid will ask a question and you have a moment where there was some critical thinking, where there was a teachable moment to talk about empathy. And what we're trying to say is we need to take those things that were happy accidents and start doing them with real intention and focus. That there is value in spending time to talk about and practice what empathy looks like. That if we're going to say we need young people to form opinions based on fact and exploration, then we have to build in that time and talk about what that looks like. And we have to model it for them as adults in that space. So I always like to say that a world savvy classroom does feel very different from the classroom that I had, and Chris, from the classroom that you were referencing that you had, which is a space where we are empowering young people to ask hard questions, where we're actually valuing the questions more than the answers that are coming. Because every answer and every new piece of information should just lead to more and more questions. Trying to create spaces where we stop telling kids they have to decide in that moment what they think, and then they have to argue and debate. I think this, and this is the right way, because those types of practices are not putting out the citizens that we actually need in the world, that we really need young people who can hold on to many different ideas at one time, who themselves are consistently open to, I think this thing, but new information might come my way. And when it does, I have to reevaluate. I always used to say to my students, like, you feel like adults always know what they're doing, and that you need to know what you're doing, and you have to like hold on to this answer, like this is the right thing. And I said, but most adults don't know what they're doing. And there's nothing wrong with saying, I think this thing, but maybe I'll change my mind. Being flexible in your thinking isn't a sign of weakness. And so, but in order to do that, we really do have to rearrange what classrooms look like. We have to rearrange what we're valuing in the space. We have to rearrange the language that we're using. And Chris, to your larger point, we have to rearrange what we're assessing. Because if we say that we care about something, then we have to really care about it. And it should be visible in our classroom culture. It should be on the walls, and it should be in our grade books. And all of that is possible. We don't have to get away with grading. We just have to grade the things that we really care about. And that is, as we move forward as an organization, it's really trying to create schools and spaces that do that.
And having a district leader like the one in Norwood rather.
Yes.
That's willing to say, I don't care about the state test.
Yep.
Just do what's right.
Yeah.
That makes such a difference. That
Yeah.
really makes such a difference.
So, sorry, just two quick comments to what you just said, KK. So one is, I love this thing about, this is something I told my kids always, like, I have never been a parent before. I'm just making this stuff up as I go along. And so, that's just how it is. All of this stuff that we do, we're just winging it. And to recognize and accept that is both sort of sobering, but also very liberating, because it gives you the freedom to go and do things, right? And the second one is this thing about assessment. I mean, I think this sort of, do we value what we measure or do we measure what we value? I think is such a critical question that we don't often ask ourselves, or like policymakers and so on, never really. And clearly some of the things that we value are hard to measure, but that doesn't mean that we can move our focus away from that. So thank you for your response. Just had a couple of comments there.
I think Dana wanted to jump in. Dana,
And Punya, I was just going to say for your regular listener, on our website, the Global Competence Matrix, it's unpacked, it's free, it's downloadable, it's in Kurt's blog for anybody that's listening. And it's also, we expect it to be iterative and change like everything else, right? We wouldn't be walking the walk if we weren't aware of the fact that, so we all the time when we're in conversation, someone will make a comment about, what about this? Or why isn't this there? And so it's something we re-examine. So I think I would say to your listener, although we define it as the capacity to understand and act on issues of global and local significance and define all these dispositions, it's to KK's point, the ability to be a lifelong learner that is constantly thinking about yourself in relationship to something bigger, and how your own individual and collective choices and behaviors will have an impact that's hopefully positive.
So I know, Kurt, you have a couple of questions, quick logistical kinds of questions. But before that, on the side, I'm actually having a chat with my colleague, Iveta Silova, who is our Associate Dean for Global Engagement. And I'm telling her that she should watch this episode. So then at some point, I might just make an email connection between you and Iveta. She's a fantastic scholar and just deeply committed to this global work. I think it would be a good, I don't know where it will lead, but I think it will be productive in its own way.
We would love it. Thank you, Punya.
Sure. Kurt.
The people watching the show, friends of Punya, friends of Chris, and friends of Young, and the people watching afterwards, the graduate students that might be taking this, doing a class project around silver lining for learning, will be asking themselves, what can I do? How does this impact me? And so I'm going to ask 3 quick questions so we can get some of the logistical data for those who are going to watch the show later. And the first one is, at your website, you have 14 micro-credentials. I just had a student do a dissertation on badging and micro-credentials. Is really, on top of my list right now of things. And they're both at the K-12 level and at the graduate level or adult level. Can you describe a couple of those kinds of micro-credentials? What do they entail and how does one accomplish them?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I could pull up this site too if it's helpful for folks to see. These were developed in partnership with Digital Promise initially, and we sort of waded into this years ago in the early days of micro-credentialing with some trepidation around, can you micro-credential empathy? Things that were like just asking some, like, what should be a certificate versus something that evolves. But what I really enjoy about micro-credentials is the way that it's shifted the conversation around how you quantify and evaluate learning, right? Seat time for teachers in a workshop, to check a box and really kind of reframing that. So what we've developed, if you want me to share screen really quickly, I can do that. If folks can see, is these are micro-credentials that essentially allow some around action and engagement, perspectives and empathy. And you'll see underneath here, they get fairly specific. So simulations for empathy development, analyzing multiple perspectives, knowledge to action projects. So you've heard us talk about that here. Small group discussions for critical thinking about global issues. All of these are on the site and you can register here for those. The vast majority of folks that are using these micro-credentials are K-12 teachers right now. And we even have a partnership with UNC across the state of North Carolina through Global NC that allows teachers to use these towards their own professional growth. So I, like you, Kurt, I think we're fascinated by the ability to demonstrate mastery for teachers in these different places and allow that to show what they know, and start to shift a little bit of the discourse, what Chris and Punya, you brought up earlier around. This is showing what they can do and what they value and what they can do in a classroom in a much more, I think, authentic way.
Anyone want to add a comment to that before I go to the second logistical question? If not, the second one has to do with how can one, at your website, I read about volunteering. So what are some examples of people volunteering at World Savvy?
This is like the million-dollar question right now, because a lot of our volunteering was in person at these massive sort of showcases. We called them festivals, but where students would present their learning. The pandemic obviously shut those down, and post-pandemic, a lot of those were trying to really encourage schools to institutionalize in their own school communities, right? Instead of just sort of an event offsite. So now we have a global advisory board. We're rebuilding a volunteer program that'll let volunteers share subject matter expertise with some students who are developing projects in this vein. We still need the sort of mechanisms to do that. That'll be an online opportunity, so you could do that from wherever. And then we also have educator advisory boards that we're building. So if there's a teacher, professor, or someone that's really interested in helping to shape tough questions like, how do you iterate a global competence matrix and continue to learn and be sure that it's representative of, we're a US-based organization, right? To be sure that it's representative of a very broad global understanding of that conceptually. So there's opportunities in that advisory capacity as well. But there'll be more student-facing opportunities coming up in the next year or so, and we'll put those on the website.
Any other, Anna or KK or Cindy, you want to add comments on examples of volunteers that you've seen?
I've had students go to these showcases where they brought some of the solutions that they developed, and having adults that are there able to speak to that's not their teacher is incredible. So that's just an experience I've had. But also, I've had people come into my classroom. So I would just reach out to your local schools and who needs people to come into their classroom to listen, because I'm all about authentic audiences for anything my students develop, writing or orally. They're not talking to me in the real life, so they need people to hear. So that's just what I think of. I had people come into my classroom this week to listen to students' persuasive letters to change our school.
Are there new initiatives at World Savvy that you're looking for partners? And if one is wishing to be a partner, how's the process proceed? Who do they contact? What do they do? What kind of competencies and partnerships are you looking to build?
Great question, Kurt. We are actually bringing on a new director of strategic partnerships. So there's a few different buckets. One is higher ed. So if you are at a higher ed institution, a lot of our work is actually partnering with schools of education to understand how to collaborate, co-create training for students that are either on campus there at the School of Ed or in the local community surrounding. So we've had a lot of those kinds of partnerships. The other partnership that we're interested in is to have a subject matter expertise. So different organizations that have deep expertise in one or another areas of global content. We'd love to hear from you. We are also launching an initiative, these changemaker hubs around the country, where they are day-long design challenges for middle school and high school students that allow, as I mentioned before in Tennessee, young people to tell us what they are most interested in. We connect that to the Sustainable Development Goals and then bring in little E experts from the community who want to share the work they're doing, whether that's around food security or climate or poverty or global health. And so if you are in a community or you're with a sort of an anchor institution in those communities, like a higher ed institution or a community college or a K-12 school or district that wants to host that kind of event, wherever you are in the country, we would love it. So yes, higher ed, if you're a K-12 school, and also global engagement, I'll add with that. Folks that are working outside of the US on advancing ideas around this, we're also interested in partnering with you.
So Punya's got a comment from our great panel there in YouTube watching the live stream. So Punya?
Sure. I mean, there's a question from Robert, which I don't think we will have the time to get to. And I did apologize to him in advance when he posted the question because I wasn't sure. But it's like speaking to these filters that allow students to move to the next level. And, I think there is a very important discussion to be had about these alternative pathways and ways that, but maybe that's another discussion for another day. And Dante, of course, has a very nice, sweet comment about good luck to all savvy educators with making those happy accidents in the classroom something more intentional and phenomenal. So I think that's a great way to end, this episode by thanking all of you for joining us today and the great work that you're doing. And I will be in touch with Iveta, speaking of higher ed, and hopefully something can come out of that. But if nothing else, you will learn about what we are up to, and Yvette and her team will learn about what you guys are up to. So thank you.
I
Kurt?
just want to say I can vouch for them. World Savvy is a great organization. Seriously, I've known this organization, God, before I was born. So, but anyway, so it was it was wonderful. I just hope you'll keep going for another before after I die, so you will still be there. But anyway, so it's a good thing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt.
Thank you so much. Thank you
All right,
all.
so-
You are, you're all mentors and heroes for us too. So we've been reading everything you've produced for so long, and really appreciate everything you put out in the world.
This has been a great show. Thanks for putting in, Chris, and for Young for those wonderful questions, and Dante and everyone in YouTube. And as I went to the website today, I always ask about principles, and you got empowerment and inclusiveness and relevancy and engagement and collaboration. I'm like ticking all these things off: passion, reflection, just the interdisciplinary aspects of learning, inquiry-based, all these things. And so I encourage people who are watching this episode to go to their website and take a look at what they're doing to taking this to the next step. We're not just talking about it, they're doing it. And next week's show, number 104, will be about 3 Fulbright teachers who are doing international collaboration from Taiwan and from Mexico. And they have a chapter in my recent book called Transformative Teaching Around the World. So we'll be hearing from them next week at the normal time. Thank you all for coming this week, and I hope you can enjoy us for the next shows we'll be having on global collaboration. We have several of them coming up. So have a great weekend.